Hello, I'm Kurt Lidke, Executive Director of Klamath Film, and you just watched Another Day, a reflective and honest look at life of a Black student in a nearly all-white school. With us is the film's director, Sommer Martin, as well as the producer, Pearson Kuntz. Thank you both so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Jinx.
Well, first of all, I want to say how refreshing this film was in several respects, because right off the bat, it's fantastic to see an Oregon-made film with a Black lead, because let's just face it, hashtag Oregon so white. Secondly, it's great to see a film with a Black lead that doesn't fall into a lot of the same cliches and tropes that we see far too often on film. Like, people can't just be people, but when it's a Black character, they have to fit into a certain concept of what Hollywood perceives to be Black, right? You can't just be your own individual. It feels really honest and from personal experience. So I'm curious how much of this was based or inspired on personal experience, because I think it's really important to start the film with that statement that you put up based on true events.
Absolutely. Well, this is a true story. Bobby, who is the main character, this is the story like 2 days of her life. And she comes from a two-parent household and she lives, kind of in the outskirts of Portland in one of the like Tigers or Hillsboroughs or one of those. And I had a conversation with her and her parents, and she sort of just told me about her story and her background of being, maybe one of a few Black kids or kids of color in her school and all the things that she went through. And it really tugged at my heartstrings because a lot of the things that she's going through right now are the things that I went through. And that was over 20 some odd years ago. And it's the same thing. And so we really sort of like clicked and we just had a lot of conversations and there was a lot of crying. There was a lot of shedding of emotions. And I sat down with Bobby and we just sort of talked and I wrote and I rewrote and I rewrote and I rewrote and you have another day.
Terrific. Pearson, do you have thoughts on that as well?
Yeah, we wanted to make it as authentic as possible because a lot of people, I just sort of providing my white lens, they're going to say like, that can't possibly happen. Or white people will question the validity of that experience. And so to have it be actual events that have happened to Bobby would make it add that layer and remove that questioning from the narrative.
Absolutely. So tell us about the cast, particularly the lead, Bobby, I guess playing herself. I thought did just an extraordinary job in her portrayal. I mean, what a tremendously multi-talented young woman. So how did you get connected to her to make this film?
Well, she actually auditioned for another project that our production company did and didn't fit for that, but she was just obviously an absolute talent and rock star. So we approached her after we were finished with that film and said, like, what do you want to make a film about? What story do you want to tell? And then brought Summer on to tell that story.
Yeah. And I mean, I knew her mother from just around Portland. I knew her mother and Trey, she actually introduced me to her husband, and her husband after called me and say, hey, did you want to direct this project? I'm like, okay. I thought it was going to be sort of like a music video, even though we did at the end sort of make it like a music video, but I thought it was just going to be very like fluffy and fun. And you can see Bobby's, like fun personality, and it got heavy real quick.
Right. So, correct me if I'm wrong here, but this was also your first time directing, right?
A narrative, yes.
Okay.
Yes, I've done documentary, but yeah, this is my first like narrative short.
So
yeah.
How was that experience as opposed to doing documentary films?
A headache. For many reasons, because when you think about documentary, all you really need is like three people, like the interviewer, the camera person, and the audio, lighting person, and the talent. But when you have a narrative film, there's so many different things that go into it, and just like all of the pre-production and the writing and the getting, schedules together and, working. being a type A personality and learning how to work well with others.
Right.
Sorry, Pearson. Um, so that there was so much to the process, and then you're actually there, and it's just like, okay, action. And it's like, okay, cut. Then you have to set up the camera for another angle and another angle. It was very tedious.
I
Yeah.
saw so much reality in this film to where it made me think back on when I was in school, and it brought back a lot of memories for me personally. Growing up in Eugene, there were all of 3, maybe 4 black kids I remember going to school with, at least elementary and middle school. One of them was my next door neighbor. We played all the time. We're good friends, never had a problem. But looking back, it's now noticeable to me, thanks to your film in part, how much those students were maybe not put on a pedestal, but like everyone knew them. Like there was no anonymity or always in the spotlight somehow, always under scrutiny, because they stood out from the rest of the crowd. I think the scenes with kids playing with the lead's hair or just having certain curiosity, I remember seeing that happen in middle school. And yeah, it was awkward just to see as an outside observer, much less for my friend being inundated with dumb, ignorant questions from people who didn't realize they were being dumb and ignorant. In retrospect, there were kids that wouldn't say they were racist at the time, probably don't think they were being racist even now, but thinking back on it, yeah, they were being hella racist. So was this film about sparking a dialogue about respect, or was it at least a little teeny tiny bit of a FU to those kids back in school that, whether knowingly or not, treated black students differently? Or both?
I'm going to say that Bobby took the high road, and it was more of like a conversation. Me, I still have a little bit of a chip on my shoulder, so it's definitely F you. What do you think, Pearson?
Well, I think there was a really intentional decision that I honestly had to confront myself on, where I was like, there is not a nice white character in this entire film, and there is no redemption for any white person in the entire thing. And I was like, maybe we should have a little something or give a little bit of hope for white people, or like, and so that was something I had to really sort of grapple with myself. But I appreciate how the film is just like not holding anything back and allowing us as white people to sit with the discomfort of what we've done.
I think that is a very valid point, because for lack of a better term, there's been a whole whitewashing of Hollywood and a whitewashing of, societal norms, where people don't really think that they're even being, inappropriate in any way. But hopefully this film maybe shed some light, get some people to actually reflect on things a little bit, and realize that, maybe they have made mistakes in the past that they can own up to. I hope that there's a moral lesson in this film. You're not necessarily trying to shove it down people's throats, but there is a subtlety there, of perhaps trying to get people to actually stop, think, maybe talk. I know it's been really difficult to showcase independent films amid the whole pandemic that just won't seem to go away, but where have you been able to showcase this film, and what kind of audience reactions have you received?
Well, we were able to, during Black History Month, a couple of schools had us present the film to the schools. So we're trying to bring it directly to the sources of where the discussion needs to be happening. So that was great to showcase it there. We also hosted a digital panel on Black girls in schools with our executive producer, Melissa Lowry, who made a film called Black Girl in Suburbia. And so we showcased both films and then had a discussion after, which was really positively received as well, during the end of summer of 2020, when a lot of those conversations were really sparking and we were grappling with where do we go from here.
Right. So has this been shown in a theater yet? Or I know that there hasn't been a lot of theaters open since you finished it. So
we premiered it in the Jesuit Auditorium Theater. Yeah. So it has been shown on the big screen there, and that was November of 2019.
2019, right before.
Yeah. But
the world is crazy.
Well, we really look forward to being able to show this on a big screen in an actual theater in front of an audience. And I'm really curious to see what kind of audience reactions that there are going to be, especially since this plays right before a break. It gives people a chance to kind of stop, talk a little bit, ask some questions. So I'm hoping that there will be a dialogue there. What sort
I
of,
hope there is a
yeah,
dialogue, but I also want to be aware and encourage folks, if you see people of color in a theater that show up, please don't go directly to the people of color and try to discuss this film with them, because that is also putting them in a very weird situation. And
right.
you're like asking them to not perform, but you're asking them to tell their feelings. Maybe they don't want to talk about it. Maybe that's something that you should sit with. But I really encourage folks to have open discussions with everybody, but don't like make a quick break to, the couple of Black people who might be there.
Right, right, right. Yeah, they don't represent all aspects of Black culture as much as I don't
Right.
represent every single white person on the planet.
Hmm. Exactly.
So, there's an old adage, particularly since this was your first narrative film, that you should write what you know. But what was the ultimate deciding factor that made you want to enter the narrative filmmaking foray and tell this story specifically?
The amount of crying I did.
Hmm.
Because, yeah, you can pull heartstrings um with documentary, but it was something about doing all of the like labor. It was labor intensive, and it broke me down in a good way. And I was able to like reflect and be like, you know what, yeah, I actually like narrative a little bit more than documentary. I like having this sort of camaraderie with the crew, and I like being creative and like writing out ideas instead of just going and asking questions and then they answer the questions. But I thought it was a lot of work, but it was really, really fulfilling. Once we wrapped, I probably slept for like 2 days. And once I got up, I said, this is what I want to do. I mean, it checked every box for me that I've been searching for within filmmaking since I actually got inspired to start into media when I was like 14 years old. And I've been looking for something and I've been searching, and I found it in narrative.
You just stole my thunder, because my next question was going to be, how did the two of you get into filmmaking?
Mm.
How much time do you have is the question.
Uh, Pearson, why don't how did you get involved into doing film production work?
I was very involved in theater and theater making spaces, and I was just disappointed with how impermanent theater pieces are and just how inaccessible they are, and inspired by the idea that film can be watched by anyone and can last forever, and these kind of conversations can keep going and going and being unpacked over a long period of time. So I really just, the medium wasn't working for me, so I switched mediums, and I've been doing that ever since. And I absolutely love it.
Terrific. There's some really well done cinematography in this film, and I'm
Yeah.
curious if you have a favorite shot or moment. I like the side view when Bobby's on stage and you get the whole silhouette lit up from the side. But if you have a favorite moment from the film, my personal favorite, actually, probably the opening prayer of Bobby when she says something like, "Lord, please let me slay this, amen." I think that's just such a great line. It just gives so much of her personality right from like the opening shot. But do you two have a favorite moment in the film?
Yes, actually, it's in the beginning, and I got the inspiration. Actually, I wanted a picture wall in the back. I don't know if you can see that right here, but I've always loved picture walls. And then when I saw it in the green room, I'm like, oh, this is it. And so I wanted to put sort of like a Spike Lee twist to it, because he's like my favorite director of all time. And so I was able to give a little direction to Kevin, who is the director of photography for the project, and he did such a wonderful job. But I'm like, this is what I want. I want the camera to sit right here, and I want her to just turn. We'll take a whole bunch of different takes and put them together and mash them together, and it'll just be great. And it turned out exactly how I wanted it to be.
Yeah. How about you, Pearson? Do you have a favorite shot or favorite moment, favorite line, something that's like, yeah, we totally nailed that?
Yeah, I just, as a theater person, that shot from behind where it's behind her and the lights are shining down onto her,
Yeah.
that is, and that feel like that brings up so much for me, and I know it does for Bobby too, as someone who's a performer all the time, and that, yeah, really captures what I love about performing.
Hmm.
Well, again, not to put what one or two people specifically on a pedestal or be representative of an entire culture, but I am curious, since again, hashtag Oregon so white, if you've received feedback from the Black students or Black families in Oregon that have managed to see this film and have their own stories to add to it, and are like, you could have made this film like an hour long and still have all these other things that we could throw in on top of it too, of our experiences. So
Oh my gosh. So one time, Pearson and I met at a tea shop on Alberta, and we were just like standing in line, and somehow we struck up this conversation with this Black girl that was standing behind us. And I started telling her about the project, and then she went in on her whole life story of how she grew up. And she's just like, oh, yeah, this happened to me, and this happened to me. And then once we finally, put the film out there, I actually had people call me and like cry. It was the weirdest thing ever. I'm like, okay, I thought we just did like this little project, but apparently this is something that is like bigger than us, and it's touching on something that needs to be talked about, apparently, because it's just like every generation is going through the same thing. So what are we going to do about it? Is my question.
I'm glad to hear that, because I felt when I watched this film that this could be really relatable. It related to me based on my personal experience growing up, having a friend who was Black, but also seeing what he went through. That a film like this that addresses a lot of that has been endured but maybe not spoken about could almost be like therapy, right?
Oh, we speak about it, just not to everybody else. We talk in the beauty salon and, shop or whatever amongst ourselves. But now it feels like we're in a space where we have a seat at the table, and we're actually being listened to. And so folks are opening up and telling the rock gut truth. And it's just like, we're not afraid anymore. And this is what we're going through. If you are kind of like, um, uncomfortable for that 10 minutes, imagine what it feels like to live in this skin every single day and go out in the
Right.
world. So, deal with it.
I do feel that we're long overdue seeing, kind of a what goes around comes around effect, particularly in film. You go through the century plus history of Hollywood films, and lots of white actors in blackface, or white actors playing, Asian roles. And I love old film, but then I watch some of them and it's just, oh, it can be really cringe. I realize that's another era, that's another time,
Mhm.
but still, you know, it's
Yeah, it's
yeah,
uncomfortable.
yeah. I'm also curious, since this was a film of Bobby playing Bobby's personal experience, how much of this film was improvised versus being scripted?
It was scripted. It was scripted. Well, I say a little bit. She kind of went off a little bit with the prayer, which I thought was great. And also the little conversation that she had with her friends in the hallway as she's being, treated like a pet. So little things like that was really, really cool to see and watch. And I saw Pearson crying too during filming, just saying, what
Well,
part I'm talking about too.
I know exactly what you're talking about. And I think, though, with something so traumatizing to happen to children, and for children actors to do it, I think it's a
Mhm.
safe choice to really keep it predictable and on the script and what's on the page. And especially those heavy scenes, like the boy with the gun talking about
Right.
shooting her, like those kind of things, we all need to know what we're getting into, and we need to know what's being said so that we can remain safe. And
Yes.
mostly not me, but like the people of color in the room and in the crew that
Yeah.
are having to sort of reprocess this as it's being enacted. I think it was a smart choice to stay on the page and not veer too much into improv.
Yeah.
So I know it's a film that's intended to be very serious. But in any film production, particularly when you're doing narrative and everyone has lines to memorize, there's always flubs, bloopers, memorable moments, little screw ups that sometimes they make a blooper reel at the end, but usually end up on the cutting room floor. Any really memorable, lighter moments from the course of production that kind of maybe at the time concerned you, but now you can look back and laugh on it?
For me, bloopers, no, but I really enjoyed a break that we had during filming where we had lunch and all of the kids are theater kids. So we I can't remember what song it was, but we had the music up loud and everybody's like dancing and singing. It was the craziest thing I ever seen before in my life, but I thought that was just beautiful. It was such a beautiful moment.
That's fantastic. Pearson, does anything stand out to you, or does that moment also match?
Yeah. When I'm looking back, it's like the people that participated in this project took it really seriously, and which I appreciate. It was as much fun as making a narrative is. We could all feel the weight and the importance of it throughout the entire shooting process. And yeah, nothing sort of sticks out to me in like a silly way beyond when we weren't shooting.
Right. So for both of you, ultimately, what do you hope that people take away from watching the film another day? Pearson, why don't we start with you? What do you hope that people take away from seeing this film?
I think the main idea for me is just that there's so much we as white people don't see. And that to assume that we understand a situation is unreasonable, because there is so much that we cannot access in our experience. And so I hope this film illuminates for white people that we are here to listen and to act differently based off what we're told, not because we need evidence of it or not because we need to have experienced it or seen it ourselves, or we don't need to relate to what's happening to fix it.
And Sommer, how about you? What do you hope that people get out of seeing this film?
I'm more concerned about the parents. I'm more concerned about the administrators. I'm concerned about the adults, because children, they're taught this type of behavior. They're taught that it's okay to say things or to hate Black people or to treat a Black person bad. These things are taught at home. So it's just what are you going to do? You need to have these conversations at home first before you go anywhere else, and you need to dead it. It has to end, because if it doesn't, the next generation is going to go through it, and the next and the next. So what conversations are you having at home with your children, and what conversations and DEI work are you doing in the school system and in work in general? What are you doing to help this problem?
That's very true. No one is born racist. It is a learned attribute.
For sure.
So, yeah. Well, thank you so much, Sommer, and thank you, Pearson, for this film and for joining us. Another Day will be screened on Sunday, September 19th at 2:30 p.m. in our Northern Shorts category and available on demand all week. Thank you, both of you, so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.